There's a kind of tired that no one sees. Not the kind you fix with sleep. Not the kind a few days off can heal. It sits deeper, heavier, almost invisible. A quiet fatigue that wraps around your bones, born from carrying things you've never spoken aloud. You feel it in those long, silent nights when the world outside sleeps, but your mind keeps turning. When every victory feels small and every failure echoes louder. When you wonder if all this fighting, all this pushing forward, will ever lead to something that finally feels like peace. Most won't understand this weight. They see you smile, see you show up every day, see you moving forward. But they don't see the private conversations you've had with yourself. The ones where you almost gave up. The ones where you questioned everything, and yet you kept walking. Somewhere inside, you lives a quiet voice that refuses to die. A voice that says, even when everything feels impossible, not yet. I'm not done. It's not hope exactly. It's something older than hope. Something built from the thousands of small choices you've made to stand back up, to take one more step, to risk one more try. People talk about resilience like it's loud, like it's shouting and charging forward. But real resilience is quiet. It's silent most days. It's showing up when your hands shake, when your chest tightens, when you don't believe in yourself, but you act anyway. This is where real strength is born. Not from the applause, not from the victories others celebrate, but from the invisible moments where you could have stopped and didn't. Strength isn't something you find in the easy places. It's not born in comfort. It doesn't come from moments when everything feels safe and certain. No strength is forged in the furnace, in the heat, in the pressure, in the silence where doubt lives. You've been there, haven't you? The nights where you sat alone, staring at nothing, wondering if you've already given everything you had. The mornings where your chest felt hollow, where hope felt like a distant memory. The days where you kept moving, not because you believed you could win, but because you couldn't bear the thought of quitting. That's where strength is born. In the quiet refusal to stay down. In the choice to keep standing while your heart bleeds in silence. Most people wait for motivation to arrive, like it's some visitor knocking at the door. They wait for the right mood, the perfect energy, the external push that says, now you're ready. But you've learned the truth. Motivation doesn't lead, it follows. You don't act because you feel ready. You act because the alternative, giving up, is unbearable. Because there's something inside you that would rather endure pain than live with regret. And that pain you carry, it isn't your enemy. It's the forge that shapes you. Every heartbreak, every failure, every closed door, they are fires you've walked through. And though they've left marks, they've also hardened you, not into someone bitter, but into someone unshakable. You've stopped fearing the struggle. You've stopped running from discomfort. Because you know now the only way out is through. And with every step into the fire, you've discovered something most never will. The fire doesn't consume you. It purifies you. Fear has always walked beside you. It whispers when the room grows quiet. It lurks in the corners of your mind when no one is watching. It dresses itself in reasonable words, in logic, in caution. It tells you to wait, to stay safe, to hold back just a little longer. And for a time, you listened. You held back dreams because they felt too big. You shrunk your voice because you feared being misunderstood. You settled for comfort because risk looked like danger. But deep down, even as you obeyed fear, you knew it was stealing something from you. A quiet ache lived inside you, reminding you of what could have been. Not because you lacked ability, but because you surrendered the fight too soon. And then one day, you chose differently. You stopped negotiating with fear. You saw it for what it was, not a protector, but a thief. A thief of your time. A thief of your courage. A thief of your future. You realized that fear never leaves completely, but you don't have to let it drive. You can feel afraid and still move forward. You can feel uncertain and still take the next step. You can hear the doubts and still act with trembling hands. This is the real war, not between you and the world, but between you and your own hesitation. Every day the battle is simple. Will fear write your story, or will you? You've learned how to fight, not with force, not with bravado, but with quiet persistence, with small, deliberate acts of courage stacked one upon another. And now, fear still whispers, but it no longer commands. Because you've taken the wheel. You've chosen movement over paralysis, action over excuses, faith over waiting. And in that choice, you've already won. Growth has a strange price, one most never speak of. It doesn't just ask for your time or your effort. It asks for your comfort, your circles, your familiar places. And in exchange, it often gives you silence. Not many talk about how lonely it feels to outgrow what once held you. To stand at the edge of old friendships, old routines, old beliefs, and realize they no longer fit the person you're becoming. There were people you loved who couldn't walk with you here. Not because they were bad, not because they didn't care, but because your path asked for sacrifices they weren't ready to make. And so you kept walking, alone. Nights became quieter. Conversations felt emptier. Laughter that once filled rooms now echoed back with distance. You've learned that not everyone who starts the journey with you is meant to finish it beside you. That truth hurts, doesn't it? The empty seats, the unanswered calls, the invitations that stopped coming. At first you questioned yourself. Am I doing something wrong? Am I too focused? Too distant? Too much? But you weren't too much. You were simply growing in ways they couldn't understand. Growth asks you to leave behind not just comfort, but also company. It demands that you choose your future over familiar faces. And that choice, it's heavier than most can carry. But in that silence, something beautiful began to take root. You started hearing your own voice more clearly. You stopped seeking validation in the eyes of others. You discovered that peace isn't found in crowds, but within yourself. Now, the solitude that once scared you strengthens you. Because you've learned being alone doesn't mean being lost. It means you've stopped waiting for permission to rise. And when the right people do appear, those who match your hunger, your values, your vision, they will not need to pull you forward. They will run beside you because you've already learned how to run alone. There's a simple truth few will ever fully accept. The only real difference between those who rise and those who stay behind is choice. Not talent, not luck, not even opportunity. It's the quiet private decision made in the moments no one sees. The decision to keep going when giving up feels easier. The decision to stand again after failure whispers, "Stay down." The decision to move forward even when every fiber of your being begs for comfort. You've made that choice again and again. Sometimes it didn't feel noble. It didn't feel brave. It simply felt necessary because something inside you refused to surrender. Most people tell themselves stories to avoid this choice. They say, "I'll start when I'm ready. I'm waiting for the right time. Maybe after things calm down." But readiness is a myth. Perfection is a lie. The right time is now, even if your hands are shaking, even if your heart is unsure. You learned that movement creates momentum. That action builds confidence. That courage doesn't come before the leap, but after. And with each step, you've been stacking something far more powerful than motivation. You've been building discipline, the quiet engine that keeps turning long after excitement fades. The steady rhythm that carries you forward when passion runs dry. Discipline doesn't shout. It doesn't need applause. It simply asks one question every day. Will you show up? And you have. Even broken, even exhausted, even when the world wasn't watching. That's why you're different. Not because you've never fallen, but because you never stayed down. Not because fear never visited, but because it never won. Not because life got easier, but because you got stronger. This is the quiet divide, where most turn back, but you pressed forward. And in that choice, that simple daily choice, you've already become something unbreakable. You've learned something most never dare to accept. Pain is not your enemy. It is your teacher, your sculptor, your fire. The world taught you to avoid pain, to fear it, to run from discomfort like it was death itself. But you've seen the truth behind the mask. Pain is simply the heat that burns away what no longer serves you. The fear, the doubt, the weakness, the hesitation. And in its place, it leaves behind something sharper, cleaner, more certain, more dangerous. Every disappointment you've endured, every closed door, every failure that made you question everything they didn't break you. They revealed you. They stripped away who you pretended to be so you could meet who you truly are. That's why you no longer flinch when the storms arrive. You don't ask for the storm to pass. You don't pray for an easier road. You've stopped wishing for comfort. Instead, you face the fire willingly, not because you enjoy the pain, but because you've seen what it produces. It sharpens your edge. It strengthens your resolve. It purifies your focus. You've been burned before, and still, you return to the flame, because you know growth lives there. There is no mastery without discomfort. There is no greatness without scars. There is no transformation without loss. You don't seek the fire for the sake of suffering. You seek it because on the other side of that burn is the version of you you're becoming. The one who no longer hides. The one who no longer negotiates with fear. The one who rises not because life got easier, but because you got real. And in that heat, you are refined. There's a kind of power that doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't fill rooms with noise. It doesn't demand recognition. It doesn't beg for applause. It simply is steady, unshakable, undeniable. You've carried this power quietly long before anyone else noticed. Built not from titles, not from followers, not from borrowed validation, but from the moments no one saw. The nights you whispered, I'll try again. The mornings you stood when everything inside you wanted to stay down. The decisions you made in silence with no witness but your own soul. Most people confuse noise with strength. They seek attention as proof of progress. They shout their intentions to the world, hoping someone believes in them enough to give permission. But you moved in silence. You made your decisions privately. You built your foundation while others were busy chasing approval. And because of that, you don't flinch when storms come. You don't crumble when doubt visits. Because your strength isn't something you wear, it's something you are. You've stared failure in the face and kept walking. You've lost what you thought you couldn't live without and still breathed. You've watched dreams fall apart and dared to rebuild. That's where your power lives. In the unbreakable spirit that refuses to surrender. In the quiet certainty that whispers, "I've been through worse." In the steady heartbeat that says, "I am still here." The world may never fully understand how much you've endured to stand where you do. They may never know how many times you almost broke, how many tears you swallowed, how many private battles you fought. But you know, and that's enough. Because real power doesn't need an audience. It needs only your willingness to keep rising. When the dust settles, when the noise fades, when the applause stops and the world turns its attention elsewhere, life simply continues. It doesn't pause to celebrate your victories. It doesn't slow down for your heartbreaks. It moves forward, indifferent to your joy or your pain. And that is where your deepest strength reveals itself. Not in how loud you celebrated, but in how gracefully you adapted. Not in how much you gained, but in how you carried what you lost. You've learned what most refuse to see. Life will not wait for you. It will not hold space while you figure things out. It keeps moving and invites you to move with it. There were times you wished for more time, times you begged for a pause, times you prayed for a chance to catch your breath. But life whispered back, "Keep going." And you did, even when your legs shook, even when your heart was heavy, even when your vision blurred with exhaustion, because somewhere deep inside, you finally understood. This isn't about comfort. It's not about perfection. It's about becoming. Becoming someone who moves despite fear, who stands despite failure, who hopes despite disappointment, who builds despite loss. You stopped waiting for perfect moments. You stopped negotiating with time. You stopped asking life to be easier. Instead, you became someone who adapts, who endures, who transforms, who outgrows the limits that once chained you. And in doing so, you've honored the one truth that matters most. After all, life goes on. And so do you. Not because you never struggled, but because you refused to stay behind. Not because the road was clear, but because you chose to walk anyway. Not because the fear disappeared, but because you carried it with you and moved forward still. That is your legacy. Not loud, not always visible, but real, unshakable, yours.